The envelope arrived on a Tuesday, like all the worst things in my life. My mother's diagnosis, my father's accident, the layoff notice from the marketing firm where I'd worked for 3 years. Tuesdays had taught me to brace for impact, but nothing could have prepared me for the words typed on that crisp legal paper. Notice of foreclosure, final warning, 60 days to vacate. My grandmother's farmhouse, the only home I'd ever really known, with its creaky stairs and lavender garden and the kitchen where she'd taught me to make apple pie from scratch. The house where my mother had grown up, where I'd spent every summer of my childhood, where Gran still lived at 82 years old, with her arthritic hands and her stubborn pride and her absolute refusal to ask anyone for help. $287,000. That's what they wanted. That's what my grandfather had borrowed against the property before he died. Money that had gone to medical bills and repairs and the slow grinding cost of survival. Gran had been making payments for 15 years, scraping by on Social Security and the little I could send from my paycheck, and it still wasn't enough. It was never enough. I sat at my tiny kitchen table in my tiny apartment in a building that always smelled faintly of mildew and someone else's cooking, and I did the math for the 100th time. My savings account, $4,200. My credit limit, $3,000. My marketable skills, adequate. My prospects, dim. There was no universe where I could come up with $287,000 in 60 days. But I had to try. For Gran. For the only family I had left. That's how I ended up standing in the marble lobby of Ashworth Enterprises 3 days later, wearing my best interview outfit, a navy blazer and cream blouse that I'd bought on clearance 2 years ago, clutching a folder full of my mediocre resume and desperately hoping that the temp agency hadn't made a mistake. Administrative assistant to the CEO. That's what the posting had said. 6-month contract, excellent compensation, immediate start. The agency had called it a lucky break. I called it suspicious. Companies like Ashworth Enterprises didn't hire through temp agencies for positions that close to the top. But I needed the money. God, did I need the money? The elevator deposited me on the 47th floor, where a receptionist with perfect cheekbones and a headset directed me to wait in a sitting area that probably cost more than my annual salary. I perched on the edge of a leather chair and tried not to touch anything. 20 minutes passed, then 30. I was beginning to think this was an elaborate prank when a woman in a tailored suit emerged from a frosted glass door. "Miss Chen, Mr. Ashworth will see you now." I followed her down a hallway lined with abstract art, past offices where serious people had serious conversations, until we reached a set of double doors at the end. The woman knocked once, then opened them and gestured me through. The office was enormous, floor-to-ceiling windows on 2 sides, overlooking the city, like it was just another asset to be acquired. Minimalist furniture, a chess set on a side table with pieces arranged mid-game, and behind a glass desk that seemed to float in space, the man himself. Julian Ashworth? I'd Googled him, of course. Everyone knew his name. The tech wunderkind who'd turned a college coding project into a $40 billion empire by the time he was 30. The magazines called him a genius. The tabloids called him a heartbreaker. The financial papers called him ruthless, innovative, impossible to predict. None of the pictures had done him justice. He was younger than I'd expected, mid-30s at most, with dark hair cut short and eyes the color of storm clouds. Sharp jaw, sharper cheekbones, the kind of face that could have been carved from marble by someone who understood that beauty and danger were often the same thing. He wore his suit like armor, and when he looked at me, I felt pinned in place like a butterfly under glass. "Ms. Chen." His voice was low, controlled, giving nothing away. "Please, sit." I sat, tucking my folder against my chest like a shield. "Thank you for seeing me, Mr. Ashworth. I understand you're looking for an administrative assistant, and I believe my experience in... You're not here for the assistant position." I blinked. "I'm sorry?" He stood moving around the desk with a predator's grace and leaned against its edge, arms crossed. This close, I could see the faint shadows under his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. Whatever Julian Ashworth was, he wasn't relaxed. The job posting was a filter, a way to identify candidates with specific qualifications. His gaze swept over me, assessing. "You fit the profile. What profile? 26 years old, single, no criminal record, presentable, intelligent, based on your academic history, and desperate. His eyes met mine. Your grandmother's farmhouse is in foreclosure. $287,000 due in 57 days. Ice flooded my veins. How do you know that? I know everything about you, Ms. Chen. I know you graduated summa cum laude from a state school because you couldn't afford the Ivy League acceptance you earned. I know you've been supporting your grandmother since you were 22. I know you work 60-hour weeks, never take vacations, and haven't bought yourself anything new in months. He paused. I also know you have no living relatives besides your grandmother, no serious romantic relationships, and no close friends who would ask too many questions. I should have stood up. Should have walked out and reported him to someone, anyone. But I stayed frozen, caught between fury and fear and a desperate, stupid hope that maybe, just maybe, he was about to offer me something that could save everything. What do you want? My voice came out steadier than I felt. Julian Ashworth smiled, and it transformed his face from coldly handsome to devastatingly beautiful, and somehow more dangerous. I want you to marry me. The silence stretched between us like a held breath. I'm sorry, I finally managed. I think I misheard you. You didn't. He pushed off from the desk and walked to the windows, hands in his pockets, looking out at the city below. I need a wife, temporarily. 30 days to be precise. In exchange, I'll pay off your grandmother's debt in full and provide an additional $200,000 for your trouble. $487,000. The number floated through my brain like a fever dream. Enough to save the farmhouse. Enough to set Gran up comfortably for the rest of her life. Enough to give me a cushion, a chance, something other than this constant, desperate scramble for survival. Why? The question came out hoarse. You're Julian Ashworth. You could have any woman you wanted. Why would you need to hire a fake wife? He turned back to face me, and I saw something flicker behind those storm gray eyes, something that looked almost like pain. My grandfather founded this company, built it from nothing, sacrificed everything for it. He was the only person in my family who ever... He stopped himself, jaw tightening. He died 6 months ago. His will contained a provision I wasn't aware of. In order to inherit his controlling shares of the company, I must be married by my 35th birthday. And when is that? 32 days from now. I did the math. So you need a wife for 30 days, just long enough to satisfy the will, and then we divorce. Quietly, amicably, with generous terms that ensure your silence and cooperation. He crossed back to the desk, pulled out a thick document, and set it before me. It's all in the contract. Every detail, every contingency, every expectation. You would live in my penthouse as my wife, attend social events as needed, convince my family, my board, and the world that our marriage is genuine. And what would I have to do? Behind closed doors, I mean. His eyes met mine, and something shifted in their depths. Nothing you don't want to. The contract specifies separate bedrooms. Physical affection in public only. For appearances. I'm not buying that, Ms. Chen. I'm buying your time and your acting skills. I looked down at the contract. It was easily 50 pages, dense with legal language I couldn't begin to understand. But the number at the bottom was clear enough. $487,000, to be deposited in full upon completion of the 30-day period. Why me? I asked again. There must be hundreds of women who would jump at this opportunity. Hundreds of women who would leak to the tabloids, who would try to extend the arrangement, who would fall in love and make things complicated. He tilted his head, studying me. You're practical, Miss Chen. Pragmatic. You're doing this for your grandmother, not for yourself. That makes you trustworthy in a way that gold diggers and social climbers can never be. You don't know anything about me. Not really. I know enough. He slid a pen across the desk toward me. I know you're running out of time and options. I know this is the only path that leads to the outcome you need. The question is whether your pride will let you take it. My pride. As if I could afford pride when Gran was facing eviction. As if dignity meant anything when the alternative was watching the only family I had left lose everything. I picked up the pen. I want a lawyer to review this first. Something that might have been respect flickered across his face. Of course. I'll have my assistant arrange for an independent attorney. You have 24 hours. He extended his hand. Do we have a preliminary agreement, Ms. Chen? I looked at his hand. Strong, elegant, probably worth more than everything I owned combined. Then I looked at the contract. Then I thought of Gran, alone in that farmhouse, wondering how she was going to survive. I shook his hand. Call me Sophie. His grip was firm and warm, and he held on a moment longer than necessary. Julian, he said, if we're going to be married, you should probably use my first name. The lawyer confirmed what I already suspected. The contract was ironclad, thorough, and surprisingly fair. Julian Ashworth had thought of everything. Separate bedrooms, no physical expectations beyond public displays of affection, a detailed NDA that would destroy me financially if I breathed a word of the arrangement, and that number, that impossible number, guaranteed upon completion. I signed the contract on Friday. By Saturday afternoon, I was standing in a bridal boutique that didn't have price tags on anything, being poked and prodded by stylists who treated my body like a problem to be solved. The Vera Wang, I think, one of them murmured. Simple but elegant. It will photograph well. I stared at my reflection in the three-way mirror, a stranger in white silk, hair pinned up, makeup flawless, and tried to remember that this wasn't real. It was a costume, a role to play. 30 days, and then I would go back to my real life, $487,000 richer, and hopefully not too damaged by the experience. Julian appeared in the doorway, and the stylists scattered like startled birds. Leave us, he said, and they did, closing the door behind them with soft clicks. We stood there in silence, him in the doorway, me in front of the mirror, the absurdity of the situation hanging between us like smoke. You look... He paused, and I watched his reflection in the mirror as something unreadable crossed his face. Convincing. That's the goal, isn't it? Yes. He stepped closer and I caught his scent. Expensive cologne, something woodsy and warm beneath. I've arranged for the ceremony to take place Monday at the courthouse. Small, private, only a photographer to document it for the announcement. Afterward, we'll release a statement about our whirlwind romance and private wedding. And people will believe that? The notorious Julian Ashworth secretly married to a nobody from nowhere? People believe what they're told, especially when the story is romantic enough. He reached past me, and I froze as his fingers brushed my shoulder, adjusting the strap of the dress. The narrative is simple. We met at a charity event 6 months ago, kept the relationship private to avoid media scrutiny, fell deeply in love and decided we didn't want to wait any longer. And when we divorce? Irreconcilable differences, an amicable parting. You'll be painted as a private person who couldn't handle life in the spotlight. Sympathetic, blameless, forgettable. Forgettable, I repeated. That's what you want me to be. Something flickered in his eyes. It's what's safest for both of us. He stepped back, and I could breathe again. There's a gala next Saturday, he continued, his voice returning to that controlled professional tone. The Hartwell Foundation benefit. It will be your first public appearance as my wife. My family will be there along with half the business world. You'll need to be flawless. No pressure. A great deal of pressure, actually. But I've seen your academic records, Sophie. You perform well under pressure. He moved toward the door, then paused. There are things you should know about my family before you meet them. Such as, my mother believes marriage should be strategic. My sister believes it should be avoided entirely. My brother, his jaw tightened. My brother believes he should be the one inheriting grandfather's shares, not me. He'll be looking for any crack in our story, any evidence that this marriage is exactly what it is. A business arrangement. Yes. His eyes met mine in the mirror. Which is why it cannot look like one. Not for a single moment. Not to anyone. After he left, I stood there for a long time, staring at my reflection. The woman in white silk looked like someone who had answers, who knew what she was doing, someone who couldn't possibly be making the biggest mistake of her life. I didn't recognize her at all. We were married on Monday at 2:47 p.m. in a courthouse office that smelled of old paper and broken promises. Julian wore a charcoal suit. I wore the Vera Wang. A photographer captured the moment Julian slid a platinum band onto my finger, a ring that probably cost more than my education, while a bored judge recited words about love and commitment that meant nothing to either of us. "You may kiss the bride," the judge said. I hadn't thought about this part. Hadn't prepared for the way Julian's hand would cup my face, gentle despite the strength I could feel carefully leashed beneath his skin. Hadn't anticipated how his eyes would search mine for just a moment, asking a question I didn't know how to answer. Then he kissed me. It was brief, appropriate, exactly what a courthouse kiss should be. But when he pulled away, something had changed in the air between us, some charge that hadn't been there before. "Mrs. Ashworth," he said softly, and the name settled over me like a weight. "This is fake," I reminded myself. "This is a job. Don't forget what this is." But as we walked out into the afternoon sun, his hand warm at the small of my back, I wasn't entirely sure I remembered. The penthouse was exactly what I'd expected. Vast, beautiful, impersonal. Floor-to-ceiling windows, modern furniture in shades of gray. Art that cost more than cars. Not a single photograph, not a single personal touch that suggested anyone actually lived here. "Your room is down this hall," Julian said, leading me through the space. "The master suite is in the opposite wing. You have a private bathroom, a walk-in closet that's been stocked with appropriate clothing, and access to any common area whenever you like." I paused at the doorway to my room. It was gorgeous. A king bed with crisp white linens, a sitting area with a velvet chaise, a window that overlooked the park. It was also clearly a guest room, decorated for no one in particular. "How long have you lived here?" I asked. 4 years. "It doesn't look lived in." Something shuddered in his expression. "I work a great deal." "I've noticed." The words came out sharper than I intended, and I softened them with a small smile. "Sorry, I'm going to be playing your wife for a month. It would help if I knew something about you, beyond your net worth and your family drama." He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, studying me with that unnerving intensity. "What would you like to know?" "Anything. What do you do when you're not working? What's your favorite food? Do you have friends? Hobbies? A secret stamp collection?" His lips twitched. "I play chess. I read, mostly history and biographies. I have 3 people I would consider friends, though I see them rarely, and I eat whatever my housekeeper prepares, which I'm told is nutritionally balanced and utterly boring. That's the saddest thing I've ever heard." I wasn't looking for sympathy. "You're not getting any. I'm just saying, you're one of the richest men in the country, and you eat boring food and play chess alone. That's objectively tragic." For a moment I thought I'd gone too far. Julian Ashworth didn't seem like a man who appreciated being called tragic. But then something unexpected happened. He laughed. It was a small sound, barely more than an exhale, but it transformed his face entirely, made him look younger, softer, almost human. "No one talks to me like that," he said. "Maybe they should. Might make the food less boring." His eyes held mine, and I felt that charge again, that crackle in the air. "Perhaps," he said slowly. "Perhaps you're right." He pushed off from the doorframe and started down the hall. "Dinner is at 7. I thought we could use the time to prepare for Saturday, go over the family dynamics, establish our story, practice being married?" He paused, looking back over his shoulder. "Convincing." After he left, I stood in my beautiful borrowed room and tried to convince myself that the flutter in my chest was just nerves. It wasn't. The week passed in a blur of preparation. Julian was a thorough teacher, I'd give him that. By Friday, I knew the names of everyone on his board of directors, the precise nature of his conflicts with his brother Thomas, the careful distance he maintained from his mother, and the genuine affection he felt for his younger sister, Elena, who apparently was the only family member he actually liked. I knew his favorite scotch, Macallan 25, and his preferred chess opening, Sicilian defense, and the way his jaw tightened when he was stressed, which was constantly. I knew he'd been engaged once before. 5 years ago, to a woman named Caroline who had left him for someone with more emotional availability, which he relayed with such clinical detachment that I couldn't tell if he was hurt or relieved. What I didn't know, what I couldn't figure out no matter how carefully I watched him, was why he seemed so determined to keep me at arm's length while simultaneously pulling me closer. We practiced our story over dinners that grew longer each night. Practiced casual touches, his hand on my back, my fingers on his arm, until they stopped feeling like performances. Practiced the way we'd look at each other, the way we'd smile, the way we'd lean in like people who couldn't stand to be apart.
"You're good at this," Julian said on Thursday night, after I'd successfully navigated a mock introduction to his imaginary aunt. "Better than I expected." "I told you I could act. This isn't acting." He was watching me with that intensity again, the look that made me feel like he could see straight through to my bones. "When you look at me, it's convincing. That's what you're paying me for." "Yes." He said it quietly, almost to himself. "That's exactly what I'm paying you for." The Hartwell Foundation Gala was held in a ballroom that dripped with crystalline consequence. Every surface sparkled. Every guest glittered. And I, in an emerald gown that cost more than my car, walked into that sea of wealth and power on Julian Ashworth's arm like I belonged there. "Breathe," he murmured, his lips brushing my ear as we paused at the top of the grand staircase. "You look stunning. You know the story. You've got this." "Easy for you to say. These are your people." "They're not my people. They're people who want things from me." His hand tightened at my waist. "You might be the only person in this room who doesn't want anything except what we've already agreed on." I looked up at him, this cold, beautiful man who had hired me to play his wife, and felt something crack open in my chest, because he was wrong. I was starting to want things, dangerous things, things that weren't in the contract. "Julian, Sophie? How lovely." The voice came from a woman approaching us with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She was elegant, silver-haired, wearing a gown of midnight blue that probably cost more than my grandmother's mortgage. "Mother," Julian said, his voice cooling by several degrees, "may I introduce my wife, Sophie? Sophie, this is Margaret Ashworth." "How wonderful to finally meet you," Margaret said, taking my hands in hers. Her grip was cold. "Julian has told us so little about you. We had to learn about the wedding from the announcement like everyone else." "That was my doing, I'm afraid," I said, smiling despite the ice in my stomach. "I wanted something private, intimate. I hope you can understand." "Of course." Her eyes swept over me, assessing, calculating. "Though I must say, you're not quite what I expected for Julian's bride." "What did you expect?" "Someone more," she paused delicately, "established." Julian's hand tightened on my waist, but I didn't need rescuing. "I prefer to think of myself as self-made," I said sweetly. "Like Julian. He's told me so much about how he built this company from his grandfather's legacy. I find it inspiring that someone can accomplish so much without relying on family connections." Margaret's smile froze. Beside me, I felt Julian's silent laughter, the shake of his shoulders barely perceptible. "Indeed," Margaret said coolly. "Do excuse me. I see someone I must speak with." She swept away, and Julian leaned down, his breath warm against my ear. That was magnificent. "She's terrifying. She's a snake who's been trying to control my life since I was old enough to disappoint her." His voice was light, but there was old pain beneath it. "You handled her perfectly." The rest of the evening was a blur of introductions, small talk, and the constant awareness of Julian's presence beside me, his hand on my back, his fingers brushing mine. The way he looked at me when he thought no one was watching, and the way I was starting to look at him the same way. We danced at midnight, a slow waltz that brought us chest to chest, my hand in his arm around my waist. "You're a good dancer," I said. "Boarding school. They teach you useless things." "Dancing isn't useless. It is when you never have anyone to dance with." I looked up at him, at the loneliness he tried so hard to hide, and made a decision that had nothing to do with the contract. I stepped closer, pressing myself against him, resting my head against his shoulder. "What are you doing?" His voice was rough. "Dancing. With my husband."
I felt his heart hammering against my cheek, too fast for someone so controlled. Relax, Julian. No one's watching. He was silent for a long moment. Then slowly his arms tightened around me, pulling me closer. That's not entirely true, he murmured. What? Someone's always watching. His lips brushed my hair. But for once I find I don't care. We danced until the song ended, and then another, and another after that. And somewhere between the music and the champagne and the warmth of his arms around me, I forgot that this was supposed to be pretend. The second week was when everything started to unravel. Not the arrangement. That was proceeding exactly as planned. We appeared at events. We charmed his family. We convinced the world that Julian Ashworth had found love at last. No, what unraveled was me. It happened in small moments. The way Julian started leaving books for me on my nightstand, titles he thought I'd enjoy with little notes tucked inside. The way he remembered that I took my coffee with exactly 1 sugar and started having it ready each morning. The way he'd find me in the kitchen at midnight, unable to sleep, and sit with me in comfortable silence while we ate leftover pasta and talked about nothing important. Tell me about your grandfather, I said one night, 2 weeks in, when the city sparkled beyond the windows and the penthouse felt almost like home. Julian was quiet for a long moment. Then, he was the only one who saw me. Not my potential, not my usefulness, just me. What do you mean? My parents had Thomas first, the golden child. Perfect grades, perfect manners, perfect at everything that mattered to them. By the time I came along, the mold was already set. I was just supposed to follow. But you didn't. I couldn't. I was too different, too intense, too interested in the wrong things. My mother used to say I was born with my grandfather's restlessness. A faint smile crossed his face. He took me into the company when I was 14, let me sit in on meetings, taught me that being different wasn't a flaw, it was an advantage. He sounds wonderful. He was. He also put that marriage clause in his will. Julian laughed bitterly. His one last attempt to give me something I couldn't buy for myself. A wife? A partner. Someone to share this with. He gestured at the penthouse, the city, the empire. He worried that I'd end up alone, that I'd have everything and no one to share it with. I set down my fork, something aching in my chest. Julian, don't. His voice was gentle but firm. Don't look at me like that, Sophie. This arrangement is working precisely because neither of us is under any illusions about what it is. But that was the problem. I was under illusions. I was drowning in them. Every day spent in his presence made the lines blurrier, the contract less relevant, the truth harder to remember. This was fake. This was a job. Don't forget what this is. But when he looked at me with those storm-gray eyes, I forgot everything except how much I wanted him to keep looking. The night everything changed started like any other. Julian had a late meeting, so I ate dinner alone in the kitchen, then curled up in the library with a book he'd recommended, a biography of a mathematician I'd never heard of, surprisingly compelling. I must have fallen asleep because the next thing I knew, a hand was gently shaking my shoulder. Sophie. I blinked awake to find Julian crouched beside me, still in his suit, his tie loosened and his hair disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it. What time is it? Late. You should go to bed. So should you. I sat up, rubbing my eyes. You look exhausted. I'm fine. You're not fine. You work 18-hour days and barely sleep, and you're going to collapse if you keep... Sophie. He said my name like it hurt him. Please stop. I stopped. What's wrong? He was silent for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, in a voice so quiet I had to lean in to hear, I'm finding it increasingly difficult to remember that this isn't real. My heart stopped. What? He stood abruptly, moving to the window, his back to me. The way you look at me. The way you challenge me. The way you've turned this cold place into something that feels like home. His hands clenched at his sides. I hired you to play a role, Sophie. I didn't expect you to make me want... Want what? He turned, and the look on his face stole my breath. Raw, desperate, stripped of all that careful control. Everything, he said. I want everything with you, and I know I have no right to ask for it. This arrangement was supposed to be simple, but nothing about you is simple, and I kissed him. Not because the contract required it, not because someone was watching, but because I'd been wanting to for days, weeks, possibly since the moment he first said my name in that cold office, and I couldn't wait anymore. He froze for one terrible second, then his arms came around me, crushing me against him, and he kissed me back with all the desperation I felt in my own chest.
His hands tangled in my hair, his mouth opened over mine, and everything I'd been telling myself, this is fake, this is a job, don't forget, burned away like paper in a fire. Tell me to stop, he breathed against my lips. Tell me this is a mistake and we should go back to the way things were. I can't. Sophie, I can't, Julian. I pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. Because I don't want to go back. I want this. I want you. I know it's complicated and stupid and probably breaks every rule in that contract, but... He kissed me again, softer this time, but somehow more devastating. I'll tear up the contract, he said. Tonight, right now. I don't want you bound to me by legal agreements. I want you to choose this. Choose me. What about your grandfather's shares? I don't care about the shares. Julian, you've spent the last month. I know what I've spent. I also know what I've found. His forehead rested against mine. You, Sophie Chen, you're worth more than any inheritance, more than any company. I would give up everything I have if it meant getting to keep you. Tears burned my eyes. You don't mean that. I have never meant anything more. We didn't tear up the contract that night. We had a long, painful conversation about practicalities and consequences, about what it would mean to convert a fake marriage into a real one, about my grandmother and his family and all the ways this could go wrong. But at the end of it, when the sun was starting to paint the sky pink and gold, Julian pulled me against his chest and said, "Stay." Not as my fake wife. Not as my employee, just stay, because I can't imagine this penthouse without you in it. Yes, I whispered. Yes? Yes, I'll stay. Yes, I want this to be real. Yes, I'm terrified and confused and probably making a huge mistake, but he kissed me quiet. Not a mistake. Never a mistake. The final week of our arrangement was nothing like I'd expected. We went to the remaining events, but now when Julian looked at me with love in his eyes, it was real. When I leaned into his touch, it wasn't performance. When his mother raised her eyebrows at my continued presence, and his brother made snide comments about gold diggers, Julian shut them down with a ferocity that left no doubt about his feelings. "She's not a gold digger," he told Thomas at a family dinner, his voice cold enough to freeze champagne. "She's my wife. And if you ever speak about her that way again, you'll find yourself permanently excluded from any family event I have the power to control." "Julian," Thomas started, "that includes board meetings." Julian smiled, and it was terrifying. "Choose your next words carefully, brother." Thomas chose silence. On the 30th day, the day the contract was set to end, Julian took me somewhere unexpected. "Where are we going?" I asked as we drove out of the city, leaving the skyline behind. "You'll see." 2 hours later, we pulled up to a familiar driveway. My grandmother's farmhouse sat in the afternoon sun, its white paint gleaming fresh, its garden exploding with lavender, a new porch swing hanging where the old broken one used to be. "Julian, what did you do?" "The debt was paid 3 weeks ago, as agreed." He helped me out of the car, his hand warm in mine. "But the house needed repairs you couldn't afford. New roof, new plumbing, some structural work. I hope you don't mind that I took the liberty." Tears streamed down my face. "I can't accept this. It's too much." "Sophie." He cupped my face in his hands, wiping away my tears with his thumbs. "Nothing is too much. Not for you. Not for the woman who showed me that a home is more than walls and furniture, that it's warmth and kindness and someone who sees you for who you really are." The door opened and Gran appeared on the porch, her face breaking into a smile when she saw me. "Sophie! And you must be Julian." She made her way carefully down the steps, and Julian met her halfway, taking her hands gently in his. "Thank you for what you've done for our home." "Thank you for raising Sophie," he replied. "She's the most remarkable woman I've ever met."
Gran looked between us, her eyes sharp despite her years. The wedding was real then?
Not just a business thing like Sophie tried to tell me? I started to protest, but Julian laughed. It was business at first, he admitted, but it became very real, very quickly. If you'll allow it, Mrs. Chen, I'd like to marry your granddaughter again. Properly this time, with you there to witness it. Gran's smile could have lit up the whole county. I thought you'd never ask. We were married for the second time on a September afternoon in my grandmother's garden. Gran was there, along with Julian's sister Elena, and the 3 friends he'd mentioned who turned out to be genuinely decent people who'd been waiting years for Julian to let himself be happy. I wore a simple white dress. Julian wore a suit and a smile that never wavered. And when we exchanged vows, real vows this time, ones we'd written ourselves, I didn't have to pretend that my voice was breaking with emotion. I hired you to play a role, Julian said, holding both my hands in his. I expected convenience. I got a revolution. You turned my house into a home and my isolation into connection. You challenged me, called me out, refused to let me hide behind money and power, and somewhere between the courthouse and the chaos, I fell completely, irrevocably, inconveniently in love with you. I signed a contract, I replied, laughing through tears. I expected 30 days of pretending. I got a lifetime of possibilities. You showed me that needing help isn't weakness, that accepting care isn't surrender. You saw me when I felt invisible and chose me when I expected to be forgotten. I didn't know love could feel like coming home, but with you, that's exactly what it is. When we kissed, Gran cheered. Elena wiped her eyes, and I felt for the first time in my life like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. 1 year later, the farmhouse is still there, now fully restored, where Gran lives with a caretaker and a garden that wins local awards. We visit every month, and Julian has learned to make her apple pie recipe, though his crust still needs work. The penthouse is different now, photographs on the walls, books everywhere, warmth in spaces that used to feel empty. We still argue about chess strategy and dinner options. He still works too much, and I still call him out on it. But we also dance in the kitchen at midnight and read together in comfortable silence and build a life that neither of us expected. Julian got his grandfather's shares. Thomas contested the will, of course, but the marriage stood up to scrutiny because it was real in every way that mattered. The company thrives. The family situation is complicated, but what family isn't? Do you ever regret it? Julian asks me sometimes, usually late at night when vulnerability creeps past his defenses. The way it started? Wishing we'd met differently? No, I always tell him, because this is our story. Strange and unconventional and absolutely perfect. He kisses me then, every time, like he can't quite believe his luck. Neither can I, honestly. I came to his office for a job. I signed a contract for a fake marriage. I expected 30 days of pretending and a check that would solve all my problems. Instead, I got him. Julian Ashworth, the billionaire who hired me as his fake wife for a month but forgot to tell me he was falling in love. The man who taught me that sometimes the best things in life aren't planned, and that the truest stories often start with a lie.